we've missed something major by just thinking that diet change is all about human diet change. The animal advocacy movement has been human-centric. We've forgotten about animals.
What if the way we feed our pets is just as powerful as the way we feed ourselves? Today's guest has some answers that might surprise you.
I started off really being a bit of a human rights activist, sort of switched to animal advocacy. I decided to try to become a vet.
From animal rights campaigns to fighting live sheep exports in Australia, his journey has always taken him across continents, always fighting for the voiceless.
It's been an interesting journey. It's taken me to so many interesting places around the world. There was a study that showed that dogs fed vegan diets were living to be an average of 14.1 versus 12.6 on meat-based diets. So that's 1.5 years.
Imagine pets living longer and healthier life without meat. Its research challenges everything we thought we knew about what pets need.
Dogs and cats and any other species don't need any particular ingredient. What they need is nutrients. And nutrients and ingredients are not the same thing. And in many countries, the meat consumption of a medium-sized pet dog is equivalent to that of the average person.
And when you scale that globally, the impact is staggering. 20% of all farmed animals aren't eaten by humans. They are eaten by pets.
And it would also spare at least 6 billion land animals from being killed each year in the food system.
If you are a vet and you are actually treating animals, how could you eat them? This isn't just about pets. It's about rethinking our relationship with animals, food, and the planet. I wanted to deep dive on your PLOS One study. 50% of the corn and soy production is
vegan pet foods. I've got some here actually. There's 4 companies in the United Kingdom. So you get this direct protein which can be put into pet food.
You conducted a large-scale survey on dogs fed on vegan diets, right? So maybe you said 50% of the consumption.
20% of all farmed animals, land animals, are not consumed by humans. They're consumed by dogs and cats.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Caffelogue with Naga, where we bring people, passion and professions that shape the world around us. What if I told you that the choices we make for our pets could have a bigger impact on animal welfare and the planet than we ever imagined? Today, I'm honored to sit with Dr. Andrew Knight, a professor of animal welfare and ethics at the University of Winchester, a fellow of Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, and a globally recognized expert in vegan companion animal nutrition, sustainable pet food systems, and animal welfare policy. Dr. Knight has led some of the largest ever studies on plant-based diets in pets, with his 2022 PLOS One research surveying over 2,500 dog guardians, revealing that dogs on nutritionally sound vegan diets showed fewer health disorders, required less medication, and had better overall health outcomes compared to dogs fed on conventional meat diets. His 2023 follow-up studies further examined nutritional adequacy in plant-based diets for cats and dogs, challenging the long-standing myths about vegan pet foods being unnatural or nutritionally deficient. His work is a testament to the fact that nutritional completeness, not the source of ingredients, defines a healthy diet. Beyond research, Dr. Knight has been a strong policy advocate, contributing to global discussions on animal welfare legislation, humane veterinary education practices, and the urgent need for the pet food industry to address its massive environmental footprint, which accounts for up to 25 to 30% of environmental impacts of meat production in some countries. He's also the founder of sustainablepetfood.info, an open access resource that breaks down complex scientific research into accessible information for pet owners, veterinarians, and policymakers alike. In today's conversation, we will unpack the science behind vegan pet nutrition, the hidden environmental toll of traditional pet foods, and how informed and compassionate choices can lead to a healthier planet without compromising on our pets' well being. This isn't just a conversation about what's on our pets' plates, it's a deeper exploration of how ethical science, sustainability, and compassion can coexist and lead us to a better future. Let's deep dive into this enlightening discussion with Dr. Andrew Knight. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Andrew Knight to our show. Dr. Andrew Knight, welcome to my show, Caffelogue with Naga. I'm thrilled and honored to have you today. Being a veteran in the vegan activism and sustainability foods for pets, I think it's going to be an interesting and curious conversation for me to learn and share this knowledge, what you have been putting it and teaching a lot of students as professors to my audience. So once again, thank you so much for doing this and welcome to my show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So Dr. Knight, you have dedicated your career to both veterinary science and ethical advocacy, right? So what sparked your interest in connecting these two worlds? Right. So I think that's my first question, right? But especially focusing on sustainable and compassionate choices in pet care. So before we dive into this question, I probably want to hear from you on your journey into the, becoming a veterinary professor and advocate for sustainable foods for pets. So maybe talk me through like how long you've been vegan and what has been your inspiration?
Okay. I started off really being a bit of a human rights activist in Australia, where I grew up in Western Australia. I became involved in the international campaigns to increase Australia's foreign aid budget, campaign against landmines globally, campaigns for human rights. And I sort of switched to animal advocacy when I became aware at some point that the numbers of animals being subjected to terrible things in laboratories and in intensive farms were millions of times greater than the number of people also suffering terrible conditions. I was a human rights activist. I was aware of various human rights concerns such as torture, summary executions occurring in various regimes around the world. And this was terrible, but as I learned about intensive farming, I realized that animals were being subjected also to terrible conditions in laboratories and on intensive farms, but they were millions of times greater. The capacity to suffer amongst animals was not millions of times less. So I realized that based on simple logic, this was an even more important issue. I still support all sorts of human rights and environmental causes. My primary focus, though, switched to animal advocacy, really, once I figured that out. So I had been involved in the Australian campaign against the live sheep export trade. Perth in Western Australia was the world capital of the trade. We exported about 5 million sheep a year on a sea voyage of sort of 2.5 weeks, mostly to Middle Eastern countries, during which time more than 100,000 would die each year on board the ships because of poor conditions and starvation. So this was the biggest live animal transport concern in the world. And I was involved in establishing the Australian campaign against that terrible trade. By the way, we very recently had the Australian government finally announced that they've agreed to ban the trade by 2028.
Nice.
Yeah, I think this proves that multi-million-dollar industries are hard to beat, but they can be beaten. And it's fantastic that we have finally gotten that commitment from the Australian government. Anyway, at the time I was giving lots of radio interviews, and I would tell audiences about the live sheep trade. And this would go really well until a certain time when the interviewer would ask me, "So, Andrew, what do you do for a living?" And I would have to say, "Well, I deliver pizzas, I deliver newspapers, I deliver patients," because I was a hospital orderly as well. And I realized eventually that I was being judged on the basis of what I did for a living. And as a very young person, I thought I need to be strategic about this and try to come up with a better answer. I would like to get a career where I could have much more impact with important stakeholders and audiences, and also be more knowledgeable about animal welfare and animal advocacy issues. So I thought about a number of careers, and when I thought about this logically about how to have the biggest impact with audiences, I realized that the answer was obvious. I needed to be a rock star, but unfortunately my singing voice was terrible and I had the wrong kind of hair. So I went to plan B, and I thought about, what if I became like a doctor or a veterinarian or an environmental scientist or a lawyer or something. I thought these would all be great, but I decided to try to become a vet. So I always wanted to do this in order to get more specialised knowledge, to be able to assist animal advocacy campaigns, and also be taken more seriously by radio audiences and all sorts of stakeholders. And my grand plan nearly got derailed in the first year of veterinary school when I ran into wholesale curricular animal killing within the veterinary degree. Animals were used as disposable teaching tools to teach surgery, as well as demonstration experiments in physiology, dissected in anatomy, and in other ways. So I ended up having to mount a huge campaign to be allowed to learn without harming animals in the curriculum, which meant that I nearly failed my degree because I ended up spending more time on the campaign than my studies. But I narrowly scraped through, and we succeeded. We introduced humane teaching methods across the veterinary curriculum, got rid of lots of invasive animal laboratories, and also changed veterinary education in Australia, also at other veterinary schools in some other countries too. Essentially, universities, we got them to bring in policies whereby they agreed to make reasonable efforts to accommodate students that had a conscientiously held belief against harming animals during their education. So we were conscientious objectors, and we used jurisprudential bases. So that means the philosophy of law, the foundations of law. I found myself in the law library actually researching conscientious objection to military service and to other forms of social service, and making the same legal arguments that we should not be discriminated against in our education because of our conscientiously held beliefs against harming and killing animals. So that was successful, and the university passed a conscientious objection policy, and then others in Australia and internationally did the same thing. So I narrowly survived all of that and got out with a veterinary degree but as I say, we had a huge impact on veterinary education process, which was well worth the loss of marks and the pain and suffering. And then I worked as a small animal veterinarian, mostly around London for nearly a decade. I was a locum vet, so I was a relief vet when other vets were away on leave or whatever. And this gave me a lot of sort of spare time. I worked sort of half the time. During the rest of the time, I ended up doing a lot of research into invasive animal research and alternatives, and published a series of studies and a book on that, and ended up getting a PhD critiquing invasive animal research.
Yep.
Out of the blue, I got asked to go and teach in a veterinary school. This came up in 2013 to 2014. I was in charge of the clinical skills training laboratory at the world's second largest veterinary school in the Caribbean, interestingly, where we taught all manner of surgical skills humanely using models, mannequins, and simulators. And then in 2015, I got asked to go to the University of Winchester, 1 hour south of London, and set up a centre for animal welfare. And we set up 3 degrees. One was a distance learning master's degree, which turned out to be a small factory for producing highly skilled and qualified animal advocates from around the world, because it was entirely distance learning. So students would enrol from around the world, and they would all get a master's degree in animal welfare, science, ethics, and law. They would get detailed knowledge of the full range of animal welfare issues, and they'd get really good communication skills so they could go out into society and make a difference. So that went extremely well. And then in 2023, along the process, I became a professor of veterinary medicine. I'm now affiliated with 3 universities, including veterinary school. And then in 2021, I had the opportunity to start doing research into vegan diets for dogs and cats. And I focused on that and did another PhD on that. And in 2023, I left to set up a non-profit organisation representing animals and to support the full range of animal advocacy issues and the animal advocacy movement more broadly. And now I have a small team around me, actually working on vegan and cultivated meat-based pet food. So we have been publishing about 1/3 of the scientific studies in this field and producing a huge range of communication outputs as well. I give more than 25 talks a year at conferences and universities around the world, food industry conferences, veterinary conferences, and others, telling people about vegan and sustainable pet food, and do an awful lot of media work as well. We have more than 500 media mentions a year of our work. And we publish about 10 scientific studies and book chapters and so on each year as well. So I've been focusing on this whole issue of vegan and sustainable pet food in recent years because it seems to be the field which has the most potential to do good, to have positive impact, but is also the most neglected so far. We know that dietary change is an essential part of combating climate change, environmental degradation and biodiversity loss, and securing a future for most of life on Earth. We know that dietary change is essential for that, but what we've missed is that that's not limited to human dietary change. In many countries, the meat consumption of a medium-sized pet dog is equivalent to that of the average person. So if you change your own diet to a vegan diet, but you miss the diet of your dog, and if you've got 2 dogs, then you might have actually missed the biggest contributor to the killing of farmed animals and environmental destruction within your household, actually. So one of the most important studies I did last year was calculated what the actual benefits would be if the world's dogs, cats, and humans all transitioned onto vegan diets. And I only looked at pet animals. I didn't consider animal shelter animals, colony-fed cats, and so on. And the benefits are staggering. Turns out that in a country like the US, 20% of all farmed animals, land animals, are not consumed by humans. They're consumed by dogs and cats. This number is probably rising with increasing pet ownership over time. In Asia, for example, pet ownership is expected to go up 30% in the next 10 years.
Every household has at least 1 or 2.
Yeah, that's right. If all the world's pet dogs were to transition, it would save more greenhouse gases than the whole of the United Kingdom produces 1.5 times, and enough food energy to feed the whole of Europe, 450 million additional people. And it would also spare at least 6 billion land animals from being killed each year in the food system. So the benefits are game-changingly large. We've missed something major by just thinking that diet change is all about human diet change. The animal advocacy movement has been human-centric. We've forgotten about animals. We have been a bit prejudicial, and that's not acceptable for an animal advocacy movement. We need to be also remembering animals. And it's mind-blowing, yeah. So this is the most potentially beneficial yet also neglected field in the entire diet change, animal advocacy and environmental movements. So that's why I focus on it now. And I encourage all your listeners to get involved as well for exactly the same reasons.
Yeah.
There's so much to be done about educating pet owners about this issue.
Wow, that's, it's like a goosebump moments, right? With hearing your journey and such intense and powerful fighting some of the legislations and bringing some change. So it's not just when you want change, you just wait for change to happen. You are part of the change, and you are the reason for the change, right? So that's something which I
see what you have done on the animal advocacy, and it sparked thoughts, especially the important. If you are a vet and you are actually treating animals, how could you eat them, right?
Yes.
So I don't think anyone, not many of them think like that, right? It's just part of their job, but uh, it's not just the job, right? But then you're doing injustice outside of your job area if you're actually treating a rescued cow or whatever, pet or wild animals which were rescued, and you're a veterinarian and you are part of their consumption, or the reason for their killing or the suffering. That's insane. So I think I'm so amazed how you got that kind of a powerful thought at such young age, and you have continued with the perseverance to get where you want. It's definitely the conviction what you had, right? I can see, I can listen to you for the next 3 hours on just your journey.
It's been an interesting journey. It's taken me to so many interesting places around the world, and I've had some remarkable adventures along the way and seen a lot of amazing things and people and places. I recommend a professional animal advocacy career to any of your listeners, especially people that are at an early stage in their careers and they're wondering about what to do. Literally, I've had the most amazing life. I've traveled around the world. I get to travel around the world on a regular basis, educating people about these issues. And by the way, a transatlantic return flight probably produces as much carbon emissions as one person consuming meat and dairy for a year, I think, or one dog, actually.
Yeah. Though I think that's. I don't think anyone would have thought about that until somebody writes about it or talks about it, like you bringing awareness about, especially when you said 50% of the, in general, if you look at the 50% of the corn and soy production is being diverted to livestock to get them bigger and produce more meat. So that's one. And then if that meat is being consumed by the pets, 50, as you said, that's a very powerful research where you said 50% of the consumption is actually through the pets. As cats, you talked about it's probably not many of them are aware. Even as you said, you're just by focusing on human diet and becoming a vegan, you are not doing any good if you have not started focusing on your pets and still giving them and buying the meat and giving them the animal food, right? So then it's not sustainable, or probably you're not doing any good from being vegan. Which is so powerful. I think kudos to you in thinking something like that, and trying to start advocating for a change in that area, which I think it's very novel. I don't think many have done, or I've heard until I started reading about you and looking at your work. So kudos to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much. And I want to emphasize that even though I have this amazing life and I get to travel around the world speaking at these conferences and educating people about this issue, I'm aware of the CO2 emissions of flying. And I try to make sure anywhere I go, at least one medium-sized dog will switch to a vegan diet, because if I do that, I've probably offset the emissions from my flight. So I try to be mindful when I travel and don't just fly for leisure. I try to encourage people and their pets to consider vegan diets as well. I think that's important. But I would encourage, we desperately need more people to get involved in this issue. I think having just one person and a few other people working part-time is not enough for a field that consumes 20% of all land animals in the United States. We need hundreds of people working on this issue. So and advocating for animals and the environment more broadly as well. So I would encourage anyone that to consider a professional career in animal advocacy. Think about becoming a vet, a lawyer, a doctor, environmental scientist, if possible, and getting set up to have a kind of career, kind of like what I have, because it's fantastic, and I also know I'm doing the most good that I can do, and I'm having this huge impact. So
my daughter already said she wants to become an animal rights activist. Oh wow, okay, that's very powerful. I think she's very persistent.
And that's good, but there are grassroots activists and there are professional activists, and if you be an animal rights activist as a physician or as a veterinarian or as a lawyer, you can have a really big impact. So I would encourage people to think about doing these things. Yeah.
I think this was something which I even brought up in my earlier conversations, right? So if you want to make a change, especially with respect to governmental policies, you have to be a policy maker, or you have to be part of that legislation or process. So and then the change is pretty easier than just contributing as a common man, right? So it's very, very powerful. Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that thought. If you made it this far, you're clearly into deep, meaningful conversations around health, lifestyle, and the science behind how we live. 60% of people who watch these episodes haven't subscribed yet. If you enjoy these insights, my humble request is to please consider hitting that subscribe button. It will help us bring much more curious minds, expert voices, and keep the show going strong. All right, I think that's, I'm still not able to move out of your journey conversation, which was so powerful. Thought-provoking.
I haven't even told you the great stories of all the wonderful adventures I've had in countries around the world, but I know you want to move on. You know, there is so much.
Yeah, no, I think I'm happy to do multiple conversations to specifically focus on one of the story. I think it's very interesting, right? So maybe we can sit together in person as well. So I want to pick up this question. Reason is there is a general myth about, especially about veganism. You know, the first time when we became vegan, the first question the family, the close family asked, "Hey, you know, they envisioned something, a person who's like so going into so much of a you know, depression and not eating because no food available." The kind of thoughts people have in general in terms of, because they, hey, what you would eat, right? But I think we have lived out of that for so long now. And general population also has similar, right? But especially with pets, the general, I mean, everybody thinks the animals or the pets, dogs and cats should eat meat. So that's been a preconceived notion, or probably if I have had dogs when I was growing up, I've been a vegetarian, you know, by birth. So the dogs we grew never had meat. So we so for me, that understanding of, you know, oh no dogs, you need to feed meat, it's very you know, different. I mean, probably surprised from a lot of people saying, you know, you should not, you are actually depriving their rights and not feeding them meat. So I want to start there, because you've done a lot of research, and I want to also talk about your book, especially you've written on this topic. So how did you arrive at making this major focus area of your research in public education, right? And then how do you convince, what was your myth buster or message to the common public about the pets should eat meat?
Sure. So how did I arrive at this? Well, I'd been interested in this for many years, but as a veterinarian and then a university professor, I didn't really have any time to explore this in detail. Nowadays at universities, academics spend all of their time marking and fixing problems that shouldn't exist and dealing with bureaucracy and administration. So there's very little time to do any research. Unless you manage to get a grant to be able to hire assistants so that you start to have some time.
Or you're somebody who wants to do research with you. Yeah.
This didn't happen for me until 2020, and I finally got a grant, and then I could actually spend some time starting to research vegan diets in pets in a lot of detail. And we did different studies, looked at health outcomes, looked at behaviour at feeding time to establish whether the animals were enjoying vegan ones as much as the meat-based ones, as far as you can tell from their behaviour. Looked at environmental impacts and so on, and ended up publishing a whole body of research, which is really exciting. It's helped advance this field. But in terms of the myth buster, the obvious one I would say, and you were asking about this, is that you just need to remind people that dogs and cats and any other species don't need any particular ingredient. What they need is nutrients, and nutrients and ingredients are not the same thing. And we all have requirements for a certain set of nutrients in the diet, and it doesn't matter how you get those. It's possible to design diets using plant-based mineral and supplements to supply all the necessary nutrients, and there's no biological need for meat. So you just need to remind people of that, and then suddenly everybody gets it again and goes, oh yeah, of course. What's happened in the last few years, there's been an explosion of new vegan pet foods. I've got some here actually. There's 4 companies in the United Kingdom that have been set up by veterinarians who are producing vegan pet foods. These are by Omni. That's the biggest company in the UK. They exist, and they work with veterinary nutritional specialists and other nutritionists to make sure that all the necessary nutrients are included. We also have cultivated meat-based pet foods. This was launched in the United Kingdom in February of this year, 2025.
Nice.
And this is cultivated chicken put into dog treats. This is an example of a cultivated ocean whitefish being developed for cat treats, and another one has just been received regulatory approval in Singapore, which is exciting. That's cultivated chicken for use in pet food. We've also got microbial protein. So this is where harmless microorganisms are grown in giant metal cylinders with a small amount of water, almost no land, organic waste products such as cane sugar offcuts. This is grown in a cane sugar growing region of China to produce protein directly. Here's some of it here. So you get this direct protein which can be put into pet food. So this was released in March of this year. This is a world first. It's produced in Germany, but they ship elsewhere. It's available inside the United Kingdom as well. So we now have all these wonderful products. Most of them have only been developed in the last few years, and they're all developed to be nutritionally sound. Nutritionists work with the companies to make sure that all the necessary nutrients are included in them. So there's no biological need for meat. There is a biological need for specific nutrients, and these diets have them.
Excellent. I would put those products list in the description if people really looking for an option to actually try out for their pets and then see if they're performing better or right.
Yeah.
So yes, I would take that. Yes.
I mean, I have a website, sustainablepetfood.info.
Yes, that's right.
I have a suppliers list which is not up to date or complete, but it's an example of where people can find some of these products. And I should say that I make no money at all from providing that. It's just a free informational service to people that are interested in this area.
True. Very, very kind of you, Andrew, for doing that. Right. I think it's not a lot of times people want to change, but the options are limited, or probably they are not aware of where to go to get such products or food for the pets. Especially right now, I think I've seen that in the last 5 years there has been a tremendous amount of availability or growth in terms of the pet foods market, which is more producing sustainable vegan pet foods, right? But prior to that, I've not really seen much of active, products, right? But again, maybe it could have been there, but probably not much. Many people were aware, so which is important role of people like us to actually start giving that message to the consumers that hey, there are options available to be more kind. So
Yep.
why don't you just choose that?
Most of these are available on the internet.
Yeah.
You can't usually go into your local corner shop and buy
Mm.
vegan pet food, but they're not difficult to get, particularly in countries like the US, United Kingdom, many other regions in the world. But people usually do need to order them online.
Okay, got it. So while we are talking about your personal journey and some of the uh, important message through your journey which you wanted to convey, right? The last point or question on that note is your advocacy often challenges deeply ingrained cultural habits, right? Have there been any personal moments, maybe a conversation with a friend, or a breakthrough with a colleague that deeply validated that okay, I'm um, moving in the right direction towards my mission? So anything of that sort you want to share?
I mean, I very regularly get people reaching out and communicating to me that they have, switched their pets onto vegan diets because of the information that I've put out there, and they've seen really good benefits for their pets, which is really fantastic to hear. They often will share photographs of their old dogs and who are behaving more like young dogs because they've got they don't have, they're not overweight and obese as so many are, and they've got energy, and so that's wonderful to hear. I had a person reach out to me a couple of days ago and say that they've started up a new vegan pet food company in
Wow.
Australia because of this information. So sometimes people tell me things like that, which is great because we need more availability of these diets in more places around the world. So yeah, there's a lot of positive feedback that I get, which is really wonderful. It's great to hear about the benefits for the animals that are experiencing these diets.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, what more, or what better than getting a validation from a common person that they switched to sustainable or pet food, for vegan pet food, after looking at your information on the research. So I think the amount of time you've spent in terms of getting these data points out is and if it reaches even one person and he comes back and says, hey, I think this is definitely beneficial, it's more than any other awards, right? So that's I think you gets a good point.
And that's why I'd ask other people to join with me in getting this information out there, because you can get some really good feedback. If one person gets back and said, "Look, my dog has switched because of the information you provided," then this might help that dog. There was a study that showed that dogs fed vegan diets were living to be an average of 14.1 versus 12.6 on meat-based diets. So that's 1.5 years, which
Yes.
is like a person living just over 10 years longer. So you get these benefits for individual animals, but there are massive environmental benefits as well, which is so important for issues like climate change and wildlife extinctions and so on.
Very
So
true.
it's really rewarding. So I hope it doesn't stay just me. I want more and more people to get involved in helping to get this information out so that we can see these positive changes.
I'm part of your
You
uh,
are part of a
journey.
team.
Definitely.
Thank you.
I wanted to deep dive on your PLOS One study. You conducted a large scale survey on dogs fed on vegan diets, right? So maybe share some takeaways and specific data points and health outcomes, right, for the audience to actually know. So
I mean, absolutely. We had more than 2,500 dogs were fed either vegan diets or conventional meat or raw meat for at least 1 year. And these were dogs in people's private homes. And we studied what the health outcomes were. And we found that on average, dogs fed the vegan diets were actually healthier than dogs fed the other dietary types. We found, for example, that compared to dogs fed conventional meat, when they were fed vegan diets, on average, they had 1/5 less veterinary visits. They had 1/3 less medication usage. They were less likely to be considered by their vets to be unwell. The owners were less likely to consider them to be unwell. If they were unwell, they got less illnesses, and the illness was less severe. So this was fantastic news. There have now been 11 studies actually looking at health outcomes in dogs fed vegan versus meat-based diets, or vegan or vegetarian. Our study was the largest, but there have been quite a lot of others as well. Some of those have also used veterinary clinical examinations, blood tests, x-rays, nutrient levels within the blood, biomarkers of organ health. So all sorts of different data points. And they all have consistent outcomes. The animals fed the vegan diets, usually, occasionally vegetarian, have equivalent or better health outcomes. And there seem to be two areas in which health is consistently improved across multiple studies. One seems to be related to less consumption of dietary allergens for dogs that have dietary sensitivities or allergies. 80% of these dietary allergens are animal sourced. And when you cut out the animal ingredients, you get reductions in gastrointestinal problems, itchy skin, and itchy ears, ear canals. These are really common in dogs, and they reduce quality of life. So those problems consistently resolve. The second thing is that about half of all dogs today are overweight or obese. They consistently slim down and are more likely to achieve a healthy body weight. They have improvements in mobility, and they have a reduction in musculoskeletal disorders. So if we have dogs that are potentially living an extra, the equivalent of a human living an extra decade or more, according to a really big study from a leading veterinary school in Canada. And those dogs also have better mobility, can be more active, they have less itchy skin and less ear canal problems, then they have better quality of life as well as greater quantity of life. Now, that's really exciting for those dogs, and yet that's nothing compared to the environmental benefits and the benefits for the so-called food animals being killed in the food system, or so many lives can be saved through vegan diets for dogs. So there are these really exciting benefits, actually. So that's what we found in our study, and that was hugely exciting. It was published by more than 400 news outlets around the world, including in New Scientist, actually. But it's not the only one. I'd say there have been 10 others showing similar outcomes, actually, published in scientific journals, including 2 veterinary student master's theses. But the rest are peer-reviewed studies published in scientific journals.
Amazing to hear, especially when you have a lot of data points, which is actually proving that these are helping the animals to live a healthier and better life. Nobody can dispute, right? Because
and it makes sense logically. If you design a diet which meets all the animal's nutritional needs, because you've added all the right vitamins, minerals, and you've made sure that nutrient levels are correct, but you eliminate common dietary hazards, and the most common one would be animal-sourced allergens for dogs with dietary sensitivities and allergies, then you should expect health outcomes to be as good and sometimes better for dogs that had reactions to dietary allergens. And that's exactly what you see in all the studies. So it's exactly what you should expect if you are willing to be rational and logical about this.
I mean, there are a lot of irrational and illogical arguments which people make. Like, we have to just disregard them and then move forward. That's the way to go. And you talked a specific symptom about itchy. The itchiness is being reduced because if I look at the research, the general
I mean, if you see cat or dogs, their tendency to scratch is more with their legs. Right? So, I mean, if not many of them are aware of why they are doing that, and there's no known causes and things because it's been a habit, right? That's how. But if you observe that they do less of that through the modification of diet, which is amazing, right? So, I mean, you have data points to prove,
Yeah,
and not many owners knows a lot of all the um, symptoms and allergies which the pets have. Then a vet like you can really spot that.
yeah. People often think that it's normal and
Yeah.
natural for their dog
Yes.
to have red skin, or for them to have noisy breathing, for dogs with flat faces. This is actually, it might be very common for those animals, but it's not healthy at all. Red skin is a sign of inflammation.
Mm.
That is could well be because of a reaction to animal-sourced allergens in the diet. It could also be skin parasites such as fleas and an allergic reaction to that. But very commonly, it can be dietary allergens. So people may think it's normal, but that's only because their dog has never been properly treated for this. And actually, it's like having a situation where your own skin is permanently itchy and inflamed. It's not pleasant for the animal. Likewise, animals with sort of very short muzzles and flattened faces have noisy breathing. Um, some owners think that is cute and they don't realize what's going on there. It's a sign of respiratory distress. It means that those animals could not tolerate very much exercise. They would probably collapse if they had to run for very long. They're at greater risk under anesthesia. They're not likely to live as long. They suffer when it's hot weather because they can't breathe as efficiently. This is not actually healthy at all. So it's not cute, it's not nice, and it's not something that we should be prolonging by breeding animals with those traits. So yeah, as a vet or somebody concerned about the welfare of companion animals, you become aware of these sorts of issues.
True. Yeah, I think a lot of symptoms what you talked about is generally assumed to be um, uh, normal, or probably they would habituated or they would outgrow by themselves, but definitely not dietary modifications can help. So that I don't think anyone uh, keeps thinking about it. So,
I was talking to some colleagues when I was at a conference in California recently, and they're veterinarians that teach at a veterinary school there, and they told me about one of their clients that came to them and said, "Look, they've spent years trying every possible medical therapy to deal with their poor dog's itchiness, and they had not been able to resolve it, and they were at their wits' end." And one of them said, "Well, I don't want to promise anything, but have you considered the diet? Have you tried changing that?" And he said, "Okay, here's a test diet for you." And it was a vegan diet. And said, give it like 3 months or so, and come back and let's just assess what's going on. And the client called up after about 3 days, I think, and said, "Doctor, you lied to me. You said this would take 3 months. It's been 3 days, and there's been this incredible improvement."
wow.
And I can't believe it. I've been years trying to deal with this problem, and why did nobody ever tell me this before? And anyway, so there are stories like that. They're not uncommon once you start getting into this field, and it's great to hear there's really positive effects for animals.
True. Yeah, it's. I think it's not many people want to provide that options to change, right? Because one is the industry needs money to for them to continue seeing the vet with those illnesses. So that's also like how human um, the medicine and the medical field has become equally more focusing on business than
Preventative health.
preventing the illness, or finding the root cause and curing them,
Mm.
right? So it's more of prolonging or continuing and keep them with medication for a long time. So yeah.
There's not nearly enough emphasis on lifestyle medicine or preventative medicine for humans, nor for animals either.
Yeah.
Sadly, veterinarians are not taught very much about this in veterinary school, and human physicians are not either. Those with an interest have to learn about it themselves afterwards, usually. There are groups now that can help, and there's speakers like me that can speak at veterinary schools and do that kind of thing. But vets have to have an interest, and the interest may sometimes come from seeing the beneficial effects for their own animals or animals they're treating. One of the companies in the United Kingdom has been established by a colleague of mine, Dr. Ariel Griffiths. She's a veterinarian who left veterinary practice when she saw the effects of a vegan diet on her own dog Ruff, and realised that she could help far more animals by setting up a vegan pet food company than by practicing as a regular vet in clinics. And now she helps thousands of animals through the vegan pet food that she provides, and she's convinced that she's doing so much more good that way. But she wasn't.
Yeah, it's more self-satisfying too when you do something of that sort.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think you've covered my next question, right? I had generally critics argue that plant food for pets are unnatural, and how do you address this argument? But I think you covered definitely in detail about the fact-based approach, and the study, the PLOS One study.
Mm.
I mean, a lot of studies and research papers available for us to back that argument that it's not unnatural. It's actually the natural food, and
I mean, a natural diet for an ancestral dog or cat is very different from the meat-based diet of a modern pet dog or cat anyway, who consumes a variety of animals they would never naturally hunt, with all sorts of unnatural additives, packaged up into formulations such as dry kibble and fed at predictable times daily. This is nothing like a natural feeding regime for an ancestral dog or cat. For example, cats in the wild would consume a variety of small mammals, birds, and insects, followed by uncertain periods of hunger. And the diet of a house cat is often kibble provided on a regular basis, so they can come and along with things like cow's milk. In the kibble will be body parts from certainly poultry, but also animals like pigs and cows that they would never naturally consume, all sorts of unnatural additives and so on. So what animals need actually is obviously not what's natural, because if they did, most dogs and cats would not be doing well because they're consuming diets that are a long way removed from nature. So they don't need natural diets. They need diets that fulfill all of their nutritional requirements. So diets need to be well manufactured by responsible pet food companies working with nutritionists to supplement them with all the necessary vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. And meat-based pet foods have all those supplements added into them, because if they didn't, then meat-based pet foods would not normally be nutritionally complete. So they're being added in anyway, and the same nutritional supplements get added into vegan pet foods to make sure that all the necessary nutrients are included. So the diet needs to be nutritionally sound. It also needs to be adequately palatable, so the animals will enjoy eating it. It needs to smell right, look right, have a right texture and a right taste. And it needs to be adequately digestible. And the data indicates that plant-based diets seem to be roughly equivalent to
more
meat
fiber. So
they're roughly equivalent. One of the studies recently showed that a vegan diet was more digestible than a meat-based diet for cats. But broadly speaking, they're roughly equivalent. So that's what animals require. They don't require a natural diet or a natural environment. Don't forget, nature's full of starvation, dehydration, exposure, injury, illness. This is not what animals require, but it is natural.
True. Oh, I think that's very comprehensive and powerful or fact-based argument for anyone to listen to, right? So there's no disputing that. How do you
my other question is on, the given how polarizing the topics like veganism and pet diets can be, right? How do you stay resilient amongst the pushbacks and the criticism online or in person from the industry, especially which is more dominated by meat and dairy and all
Right.
the animal agriculture, right? So
I
what?
guess it's two things. One is your satisfaction really has to come from inside. It has to come from knowing that you're doing the best that you reasonably can yourself, rather than from external things.
Mm,
Whether you succeed or fail often
mm,
doesn't depend on you. It often depends on all sorts of external factors, a lot of which are not fair or reasonable, and they're certainly not under your control.
mm,
So I think we need to try to worry less about what happens out there in the world and worry more about whether we're doing the best that we can as individuals. And if we are, I think we should be satisfied with that, regardless of the outcome. The second part is that pushback is often not as bad as you would think. It's very common that I will get up to speak to a very skeptical looking audience, and I can tell this because of the facial expressions and the body language in the beginning, and then the crossed arms and so on, and the frowns, and who's this crazy professor getting up to teach us about that cats can be fed vegan diets. And I will speak to a couple of hundred or more veterinarians or food industry scientists and so on. But during the presentation, you see all the facial expressions change,
mm.
and the arms become uncrossed, and they go, because you remind them of obvious points, such as animals don't need ingredients, they need nutrients. They're not the same thing. And you provide key information. Within the last few years, nutritionally sound vegan pet food diets have been developed. They didn't know that. They assume that people have been making their own vegan diets at home, and these are nutritionally unsound. That's the way it used to be, but no longer. In the last few years, we now have many nutritionally sound vegan diets. And then you tell them about the scientific evidence showing good health outcomes, major environmental benefits, good palatability. And they don't know that either, because most of that has only occurred since we started doing studies in 2020. So there are a few people who will resist all logic and reason and be obstinate, but most people who are scientifically trained cannot resist reason and evidence, and are willing to concede that the case in favour of doing this, providing diets are nutritionally sound, is overwhelming. And you see by the end of it, the expressions change and the body language change, and there isn't the pushback. Most people do accept
Yeah.
the evidence because the evidence is overwhelmingly in favour of this.
Wonderful. I think when there is a clear evidence and facts presented, probably, as I earlier said, some of the illogical folks might argue, but if you're really trained to understand scientific data points, then of course there is no contradiction to that. Yeah, true.
It's very satisfying to
Yeah.
experience. I encourage anyone to get up in front of an audience, and people are welcome to take my PowerPoint presentation and just tell people what's going on in this field. Tell them about all these new diets and about the incredible benefits and the scientific evidence demonstrating all of that. And people will experience this themselves. It's wonderful to see all those skeptical expressions flip
Wow.
around to the opposite by the end of the presentation.
I think it's really intimidating for me to now take that and start putting it out in front of a lot of people, because there's a lot of misconception, especially
Yeah.
about pet food. How could you feed the pet vegan? So yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, should we should
people
bust
just
all
don't
that?
know. People just don't know. They just are not up to date and informed, and they make wrong assumptions. They assume that vegan diets are nutritionally unsound. If that were true, their concern would be correct. What they don't know is that the world has changed. We now have a field of vegan diets developed with veterinary nutritionists that are nutritionally sound. They don't know that. They don't know all sorts of basic things about this field. They just need to be educated.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right. Very, very well said, Dr. Andrew. Right. Do you think all the veterinary schools or the universities where they're teaching is already incorporated such sustainable, food production or ethical way of, doing things in their curriculum, or do you think you're advocating for it, or how?
Sustainability is becoming a bigger concern for the veterinary profession. It's something that's discussed quite commonly within the United Kingdom, where I'm based.
Ask any specific innovation which is happening in the recently in the pet food industry, or vets have started their own company to, based on the research, to actually start bringing up, or probably producing more vegan pet foods. But then in general, the existing pet food industry receptive to this?
Well, there is a couple of competing trends. So one is resistance to the rise of vegan diets. Companies producing meat-based pet foods. The biggest companies are making more than $1 billion each year from selling meat-based pet foods. Absolutely, and there's been this huge blind spot. We have forgotten to consider pets. The animal advocacy movement has wrongly assumed that diet change should be all about human diets only, and we've forgotten the animals. So there have been several studies looking at the environmental impacts of pet food, and they've had some really dramatic results. One of the major ones was published by Ocken, University of California, Berkeley in 2017. And he showed that in the United States, for example, the Ocken study showed that if dogs and cats were their own country, they'd be the 5th largest country in the world in terms of greenhouse gas emissions because of their diets. The important thing is though, that I think that surveys have shown that twice as many people are interested in choosing cultivated meat than vegan diets. So it's a very popular alternative. There was a wonderful debate between myself and another veterinarian in the main veterinary news journal earlier this year, in which he put forth interesting theories, such as humans were naturally hunters, and when we transitioned to agriculturalists, we suffered brain shrinkage.
If you liked this conversation, please hit the like and subscribe button to get the latest updates from my channel, Caffelogue with Naga. Thank you so much.